Morning everybody and welcome. My session that I call in FenceLob, an alternative to DevOps, or really it's about stories from the front line. Before I begin, I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about myself. I'm tea drinking, shoe loving northern lass. I've got an absolute passion for service desk, customer service excellence and higher education. I've worked in IT within HE for just over 10 years now, mainly in frontline and IT service management roles. I started my career back in 2006 at the University of Leeds, and during my time there I was service desk manager. And in that role I was responsible for actually taking our very traditional catch and dispatch kind of log and flog help desk and transforming it into a sector-leading, proactive, customer-focused IT service desk using the Service Desk Certification Framework. In December 2015, I joined Leeds Beckett University, where my role there is Head of End User Services, interesting job title. But my role is actually to lead, manage and develop the teams that are responsible for frontline services, and that actually includes the IT service desk, second line desk side and desktop support, and the IT AV classroom support. I've been a member of the UCISA Support Services group since 2012 and took over the role as chair in March this year. Now, through both my day job and my work I do with the UCISA Support Services community, I get to talk to a lot of people and a lot of frontline and service desk staff. And I get to hear a lot of really interesting stories, and some of them are really positive, really inspiring, really motivating. There's so much good work going on in our sector. But some of these stories are not so good, and I have to say a topic that just comes up time and time again is FenceLob. So quick show of hands if you know what I mean when I say FenceLob. So it's kind of the word I use to describe what happens when projects and change kind of rush things through and just sling them over the fence into the live environment with little regard really for how this is going to be managed and supported. So I've no formal project management training. I've not really got any project management experience. You know, it's not something I do. I don't manage projects. But I am and have been really involved in lots of different change and project programmes in various different guises. And I feel that actually this has given me a lot of insight into why service transition is often quite a bit of a bumpy ride. My experience is often that this service transition aspect is the area that gets the least attention, and particularly when timescales are tight, it's the thing that kind of gets dropped off the end. So I'm here today really to talk to you and persuade you as projects and change managers as why you should work more closely with support services to avoid FenceLob. So I thought I'd actually start by saying the value and the benefit, you know, what are the value and the benefits of service desk and support services to our sector and to our environment. Well, the consumerisation of IT and the higher fee regime, you know, we all accept that that's forced university IT departments to move towards a much more greater professionalisation of services. And as part of that, university service desks have been forced to accept that the break-fix model is just no longer their primary purpose. Through my work with UCISA, I'm really keen to ensure that our sector recognises the service desk and support services, and that it plays a critical role in the value and delivering on student experience and customer experience. Therefore, it's essential that we actually invest time and effort in developing the people and the processes that underpin our frontline support. The value of the service desk is becoming more widely recognised, and our sector needs to continue to improve the capabilities of support staff and our IT service management processes. However, this can't just happen. We can't just do this on our own. We need a commitment from every area of IT to engage and collaborate with these frontline teams. So actually I was really pleased and really excited when Mark invited me to speak at this conference, because it would seem finally that service desk and support services is no longer the Cinderella of IT. So service transition is where the area where project and change and support services have the most interactions and should be where they really come together. Service transition is all about ensuring that changes and new services are introduced into the live environment in a controlled and planned way, and we do this to ensure the best experience for the customer. And I think the benefits for robust service transition are actually really obvious. They're used to identify business owners, ensure that we promote the benefits of implementing change, deliver appropriate training and testing, and ensure there's a focus on communicating the changes to the customers and the users. And this communication is not just about the what, but it's also the why, what's in it for them. Service transition also helps ensure that we plan for support, and that's really important. We need to think about what's going to happen once the service moves from project into business as usual. Service level agreements will ensure everybody understands the what, what is the service, what are we delivering? But we need to think about the how and the who, and this includes defining roles and responsibilities for first, second and third line support. And we can do this through the use of operational support models and operational level agreements. So this all sounds fantastic. I mean, who could argue with any of this? Just common sense, really. But honestly, ask yourself, how often does this actually happen? During this session, I'm just going to talk through a couple of stories from Frontline and talk about a few tips and strategies that you can use to engage and work with your support services and just help improve your projects and improve your service transition process. So, as I said, I did talk to a lot of people and I have a lot of stories, but I don't really want to single out any particular university or any particular member of staff, so I thought I'd use a few fictional universities today. So my first story is from Monsters University, and this is a perfect example of FenceLob in action. So this institution embarked on a really ambitious programme to implement a number of additional features and services into their existing mobile app, and they wanted to do this ahead of the academic year. Now the timescales were really tight for this. However, original implementation of the app had gone really well, and for the past 2 years the service had been absolutely stable. So although the service was really well used, support calls for it were, they were really low. Based on this information, Project and Change team felt that there was, the proposed enhancements wouldn't really have that much impact on end users, and so they didn't engage with support services. Although they did send an email a week before to say that the changes were happening. Now, unfortunately, the implementation did not go particularly well, and there were some initial problems that with the new features, they just weren't working as expected. Users started to contact the service desk because that's where they went for support for that product, but the service desk had not been engaged, they didn't really know what was going on. So they couldn't explain to the users, they couldn't support the users, and they couldn't even really route the questions. Support calls rocketed from 10 per month for this service to just over 300, causing a significant backlog and a significant bottleneck for the rest of the IT support function. This actually results in just a really poor user experience, and people started to just disengage with the service and disengage with the new functionality. And actually thinking of this, reputationally, it's very hard to go back. It's very hard to go back from this. So my next example from the Empire State University, and another example of FenceLob. On this occasion, the service desk manager had a team meeting with the team, and the team started to say they were seeing a lot of calls, unexpected calls, relating to questions about self-service holiday system. So it transpired that this service had been piloted by a very small user base for a number of months, but then a decision had been made by the project team to expand that to a wider group. And although some comms had gone out to that wider group, the service desk had not really been included. So during the weekly operational meeting, the service desk manager raised this as an issue and just asked the technical manager that was responsible what support plans had been put in place. The technical manager's response: well, users can just ring the service desk. So imagine how frustrating that is for the service desk manager. Well, I am the service desk and I don't know what's going on, and how can we support the users? This could have just been avoided really easily with something as simple as copying in the service desk to the communication that went out to the end users. But you know, this isn't deliberate. I'm not saying that projects deliberately set out to exclude support services. It's just a lack of understanding, I think, on both parts about the roles that each play in service transition, but also a lack of understanding from projects about the implications and the impact that changes can actually have on frontline staff. Now, these are two quite extreme examples, but they are real nonetheless, but I'm just using them to highlight why good communication and collaboration is actually really, really important. So a couple of negative examples there, but it's not all bad news. Sometimes it can be really, really good. Springfield University, they have a much more positive approach to service transition. Just over 18 months ago, they decided they were going to implement Office 365. Now, the Project Management Office realised that this was not just about the implementation of technology, but really it would require cultural change and change into working practices. Because of this, they decided to work really collaboratively and really closely with not just with all areas of IT, but in particular the service support teams. And they just wanted to ensure that the transition process went as smoothly as possible for their customers and users. So service desk and other support teams were included in the initial project workshop and were able to input and influence key decisions. For example, service desk staff had a really good understanding of the kind of peaks and troughs of students using email throughout the academic year, and they were then consulted with as to what would be the best time to migrate student email. The support teams were also used as early adopters of the system, not just to help identify issues and bugs, but also because they were seen as being best placed to anticipate the types of queries and the types of questions that users might have. This information was then used to create comprehensive support documentation and FAQs. Now, we all know delivering training and awareness sessions to end users can be quite resource intensive. But actually, it's really, really important when you're trying to embed a new technology. The Project Management Office collaborated with support staff and set up a series of Office 365 roadshows and coffee mornings. The service desk were there. They were actually done in the service desk office, and they delivered presentations, top tips, that kind of thing. But they were also able to provide face-to-face and one-to-one training on Office 365. The benefit to the Project Management Office, well, additional resource, additional support for their project. The benefit for support services, an opportunity to directly liaise with users and increase the perception of the service desk as a valued service. And the benefit to the customer and the user, well, they got the support that they needed to be able to embed the new technology. And actually, because support services were consulted and included, there was just a greater sense of ownership within the teams, and therefore they were much more likely to promote and sell the benefits of Office 365 because they'd bought into it. And they were actually able to work really closely with those users that were maybe resisting the change and just help them to adapt it as well. So some interesting stories there from the front line, but what can we actually do to make it better? One element of service transition that I feel is particularly useful is the operational support model. This can be used to define the requirements needed to manage the service and its components in the operational environment. It should be based on business requirements, service level requirements and operational requirements, and these should be defined and designed at the beginning of the project. The operational support model should form a key part of service acceptance criteria and should be agreed and signed off by all relevant parties before the change is introduced into the live environment. And notice that word agreed there. A service level agreement is used to define the what are we delivering, but the operational support model will help us understand and define the who and the how. It should include information on the responsibilities of first, second and third line and which teams and which functions are going to be responsible for each layer of support. A good operational support model will include details of online help, self-help, support documentation, FAQs and training. And this is for support staff and for end users. And it should also cover, who is going to be providing that and how is that going to be maintained going forward. We should also think about who's responsible for communicating information about the system. That includes things like maintenance windows and upgrades. And finally, it should cover information about the governance structures. So who will authorise changes, who will manage development roadmaps, and who's going to be making investment decisions. So I do have a template for this document, so if anybody is interested, if you let me know, I can email you a copy. So another element of service transition that I feel is really useful and really important is service acceptance criteria. Having a service acceptance criteria checklist will ensure that the new or the changed system and service meets both the quality and the functionality required before it's deployed into the live environment, and will ensure that the customer and user requirements are met, and, most importantly, that the service can actually be fully supported once it moves from project into BAU. It makes sure that these things are considered before we release the change, rather than trying to shoehorn support arrangements in after it's been kind of lobbed over the fence. So service acceptance criteria should help us answer the following questions. Is the release and deployment plan present and agreed on? Is the end user documentation ready? Has it been distributed? Is the go live date agreed on? Are all relevant parties aware, and has appropriate notice been given? And this sounds really, really simple, but it's just something that gets so frequently overlooked. Do we have the measurements in place, for example, for SLA purposes? Have the internal tests been performed and completed successfully? Are operational procedures defined and ready? And that will include your operational support model. And are all processes, responsibilities defined and in place? So if the answer to any of these questions is no, then are we really ready to release our new or changed service to our customers? If we don't have these things in place, what is the impact? From my experience, service acceptance criteria is just a really good way of focusing everybody's attention on the impact of the change to our end users. So, operational support models and service acceptance criteria, my two must-haves for successful service transition. But we also need strong collaboration between project and support. So here's how you can help us. You can actually talk to us. If we're engaged and we're included, we will have that better sense of ownership, and this means we're much more likely to promote and support the change. That's better for you, it's better for the customer, and it's better for us as well. Share project documentation and invite us to project meetings. So often support services are not included in the planning process at all, and yet we can actually provide you with valuable insights into user behaviour that could actually help and benefit your projects and your transition process. During service transition, knowledge management plays an important role. Everyone, through to users, service desk, support teams, need to understand how the new or the modified service works and how it's going to be managed in the live environment. You can help us by providing us with that knowledge. We need proper training, we need proper documentation, we need proper support materials. And we need this because we need to develop really good product and business knowledge for us to be able to provide the high quality support for your systems and your services. But we rely on you for this. Rubbish in, rubbish out. We have the potential to make your services and your systems look really, really, really good. But we also have the potential to make your systems and your services look really, really, really bad. And I think once that perception has been made, it can be really difficult to undo. So it is worth you investing that time and that energy in giving us that product knowledge. And consider the impact of changes on support staff. As I've said, so often service desk staff tell me they feel like the dumping ground, the Cinderella of IT. Imagine being the last person to find out, the last team to find out that a change is happening or a new service has been released. So many times I've been told by service desk staff from right across the sector that the only time they knew about something was when the customer rang up and asked them a question, or when they read it on a news bulletin, or they've got a colleague in another area that forwarded them an email. It's really, really demoralising and really demotivating. So just think about the impact that that can actually have on your support service teams. Agree early life support as well. You may decide that this will sit outside of the service desk, and that's a really valid option, but that doesn't mean we shouldn't be included. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't know about it. Chances are we'll still get a call from a customer, they'll still ask us questions, that's where they're used to going. So just make sure we know what's going on. So that's how you can help us, but how can we help you? We can talk to you. We're really close to the customers, we're really close to the users, and so we should take responsibility for ensuring that the customer and user requirements are carefully considered. And you know, I do hear service desk managers saying our projects just, they don't engage with us, they don't talk to us, but how often do we in support services go out and engage with projects and engage with change? You know, we shouldn't be passive in this process. We should be proactive at engaging with you and finding out what's going on. We can help with user acceptance testing. I don't know if any of you here have actually used your service desk for user acceptance testing, but you give your service desk the challenge of trying to break something, ooh, they'll love that, and they'll probably identify quirks and bugs and anticipate things that you just wouldn't have had a clue about. Your service desk can be used for project communications. You know, service desk job day in, day out is they take that complex and technical information and they transform it into something that is more digestible for the customer, so they can help you ensure that your complex and your challenging information is provided in a format that's best suited for each of the stakeholders. You know, that's their job, that's what they do. Your service desk is there to act as a liaison point between the customer and the project. You know, whether that's answering support queries, running awareness sessions and training, running feedback surveys, we can provide you with valuable resource. And actually, because we regularly liaise and communicate with users, we can actually leverage that existing relationship to just improve engagement with the project, improve engagement with the change. We can gather data and feedback, you know, whether that's formal through surveys or focus groups, or informally. You know, your service desk will actually be the eyes and the ears of the IT department. They'll be full of useful information around user behaviour, expectations, perceptions, and this is all information that you can use to make your service transition go as smoothly as possible and to improve your engagement. So that almost brings me to the end of my kind of bit on service transition. But before I finish today, I actually wanted to share with you my really personal story of higher education. So this is me, aged 17. I'll be honest, my life didn't get off to a particularly good start. I had a very difficult and unstable childhood. By the time I was 15, I'd moved house 4 dozen times. My mum was on her 4th husband. And it's actually no surprising that at the age of 17, I found myself living in a homeless hostel. Now, I was trying to hold down a job, I was trying to stay on the straight and narrow, I was studying for my A-levels, but I'll be honest, it's a difficult time. And 6 months into sixth form, I found out I was pregnant. Now, teenage pregnancy in 1991, still fairly controversial, and for somebody that went to a really strict church school, very controversial. And I was actually asked to leave, firmly and politely, but was asked to leave. So I'd managed to scrape together a few GCSEs, but at that time there was no support for teenage mums within education, and that was it. I thought, well, that's education done for me. And to be honest, I've never really thought people like me went to university. So the next 8 years I focused on working, taking care of my family, had a number of different jobs in retail, married at the age of 23. By the time I was 25, I'd had 2 more children and was a full-time stay-at-home mum. Now, my lovely dad passed away in 1999, and it was just, as horrible as it was a wake-up call for me. And I decided I needed to be a role model for my children. I wanted them to have a better start in life than I'd had. I was hearing a lot about this thing called the internet. I'll be honest though, I could barely turn on a PC. When I was at school, you had to be in the top maths set to do computing, which I definitely wasn't. But I was very curious about this internet thing, so I enrolled on a part-time college course. I absolutely loved being in college. I loved IT, not so much the technology, I loved what the outcomes and the things it could do. And after 18 months being back in education, I got the amazing opportunity to go to university. Now it was difficult. This was 2002. There still wasn't massive amounts of support for mature students. Certainly not for a married mother of 3 young children. I was in a cohort of around 200, and I think less than a dozen were female. It was difficult. I found myself having to resit my second year, but I had a lot of support from some tutors that really believed in me. And finally, in 2006, I keep skipping ahead, sorry, 2006, I graduated with a degree from Leeds Metropolitan University, as it was called then. I was the first person in my family to go to university, the first generation. Now, following graduation, I managed to secure a job at Leeds Uni, and during my time there, I was given the support and the opportunity to undertake further study. It took me 4 long years, but in 2013, I completed an MSc in IT Service Management. Again, hard to balance family life and working and studying, but I really was immensely grateful for the opportunity I'd been given. You know, here I was, teenage mum, kicked out of school. Now I had not 1 but 2 degrees, and it just seemed amazing to me and actually confirmed my love of the higher education sector. So this is my daughter Holly, and I just like to think it goes beyond. It's not just about one person and what that one person achieves. It's very, very far-reaching. I like to think that I did become a role model for my kids, and my love and my passion for the sector really inspired them. On a hot summer's day in 2014, I watched my daughter Holly graduate from York University with a 2:1 degree in law. And I have to say, one of the happiest days of my life. It will just stay with me forever. So I don't know if any of you here are involved in graduation ceremonies at all, but it's just that reminder, you know, don't ever underestimate the impact that those ceremonies and what they actually mean to families. It was just something that will stay with me forever, really. So this is my middle daughter, Eloise, and very much like the story we heard from Chris on Wednesday about her son, not an actual academic, hated school, absolutely hated it, found it really difficult. We actually never thought we were going to get her through high school at one point, but she went to that graduation on that hot summer's day, and that graduation just kick-started something in her and just inspired her as well. And because now universities do have that much broader range of courses, she's now studying for a foundation degree. She started university in September, and it just again was just that reminder that universities, they are for everybody. So that does bring me to the 1st of December 2015, my first day at Leeds Beckett University as it is now, and a really, really surreal experience. I found myself in the Grange, so I don't know if any of you know Leeds Beckett campus, but the Grange is a beautiful, beautiful old manor house that's currently the home of IT services, but was actually where I'd spent my first and second year as an undergraduate studying, and it did really feel like a homecoming. This is where it had all begun for me, and I'm now so proud, honestly I can't tell you, I'm so proud to be working back at the university and giving back to the place that gave me my stepping stone to my future and my kids' future as well. So it's my very personal experience of higher education, and if I come across as really excited about it and really passionate, you know that that's why. But you might wonder why I'm actually telling you this. Well, 2 reasons. As a conference organiser, I always call the Friday, we call it Fuzzy Friday. I don't know if you have it as Fuzzy Friday, but I think Fuzzy Friday always deserves, you know, a feel-good story, so I hope that's what I'm giving you today. But also, it just makes me think, you know, we use the words customer service and student experience and student voice, and they just become very much part of what we say every day. But I think sometimes it's very easy to become complacent about what that actually means. Our institutions are full of remarkable people with remarkable stories, and for me, I know more than anybody that actually university can be a life-changing experience. I really, really believe, I'm really passionate about our sector. I've so much to be thankful and grateful for, and I've tried to really take that and make sure that I use that every time I'm trying to implement something, every time I'm trying to drive forward service improvements. So, you know, we should all be thankful here today that we do get to work in these places that are just filled with They're just filled with so much hope and potential. They're just amazing places to work. And so I guess I'm telling you this because I want you to think, you know, each day when you go to work and you're looking at things, remember and be reminded that there's an actual human being that sits at the end of each process, of each system, of each service, of each piece of equipment that we install. And make the words student voice and customer experience just really mean something. Yesterday I heard a quote from one of the speakers who said, one person can make a difference and each person should try. So that's going to be my top tip, my top takeaway from this conference. So I'm just trying, I guess, to encourage you all to go back to your own institutions today and engage with your support services and engage with your service desk and just really think about how you can put the user at the heart of the work that you do every single day, really. So thank you very much for listening.
We have time now for a few questions.
My name is Jenny. I'm from Edgehill University in West Lancashire. Thank you for sharing your story. You know, that does remind us of the importance of what we do. Going back to the earlier part of your talk, why do you think it is difficult that support services and projects, you know, why do they find it difficult to talk to each other?
I think it's just a lack of understanding, I think. Projects are just very much driven by, you know, it's all about planning and tasks and things like that, whereas support services are more about the kind of firefighting and the reaction. And I think, you know, traditionally they lived in very separate worlds and separate bubbles. So I don't know, does anybody here, do they work really closely with their support services? Do they really engage with their service desk? Because I'm actually thinking there might be a potential for a really nice toolkit on service transition here. I'm seeing some collaboration marks. So you know, and it's not all doom and gloom, but I don't know. I think it is just that lack of understanding on both parts, really.
Hi, Simon Geller again. A couple of comments really. I think there's something about timing when you actually tell the support desk if you get them involved too early in the process and you've still got a way to go before that service gets rolled out. People can lose interest, and you know, and then you miss it later on when you really need them.
I think for me, I think it's always important to include them at the very beginning, so they know, even if that's 18 months in advance, so that it's kind of, they know and they don't hear about it from other areas. But then you might not engage with them until you are actually planning for service transition. But you know, so often we're not included in the planning process at all. So I think timing is a big thing, but always at the beginning, and then maybe as you get towards the end.
Yeah, and my other point would be about pitching it at the right level. As I've had projects where I've had the head of support services is on that project, and I've actually assumed he's telling everyone what's going on, and it's turned out he hasn't. I hear some nods.
Absolutely. And I think at universities we are very hierarchical in that way. And there maybe is a reluctance, but your service desk staff, I'm not talking about your service desk managers or your support managers, but your service desk staff are the ones that are talking to your customers every single day. So why aren't they included? You know, why would you not bring them in? It's very hard to, you know, you can't talk to every customer, you can't talk to every end user, but you can talk to your service desk staff who are talking to those people every day. So I think that for me is just, you know, breaking down some of the barriers really, and trying not to be so hierarchical about things. Of course, for us to be able to provide the resource, we have to be a well-resourced service desk, and I know in some institutions that's a challenge. So that is about making sure we are investing in support services, in service desks, so that they do have the capabilities to contribute to service transition.
It seems to me, and feel free to comment on this one, that you go from one equilibrium to the other with projects and services. So projects necessarily are a more stainless steel type of approach, whereas services as a whole are a gold plating approach. So in the old days, projects didn't, as you say, paid probably little heed to services and did lob it over the fence. Therefore, you got something that approximated stainless steel lobbed over the fence. And everyone realised that, and then they started consulting services, and it became a very obstructionist, and nothing was allowed to go live because it didn't meet the gold-plated standards. So in the end, you've got to find equilibrium somewhere between the two. And for us, that didn't really work until we basically put a service transition team in the middle, still nominally reporting to services, but not responsible for running any of the services, and you sort of had an honest broker in the middle. Does that in any way reflect your experience or view of the world, or did you do a different sort of route?
I've never been fortunate enough to work in an institution that has a service transition team. That sounds absolutely amazing, but I always tried to, I'm a naturally very nosy person, and I think as service desk manager that stood me in good stead. I read a lot, I spoke to a lot of people, and I would hear a lot of things, and I would be really persistent, so I would go knocking on people's doors. I would invite myself to meetings. So I guess I took on the role a little bit of service transition, but I think not everybody's empowered to be able to do that, or doesn't have the time or the capacity. So.
Thanks.
Thank you.